catch basin grates in the infield. By building the track curb the way I've suggested, we can eliminate those structures from the infield and have a full usable width of the infield as opposed to a restricted width of the infield. Has great safety implications as well as utility of the infield implications. And finally, we believe that this will greatly facilitate the construct of the anchor curb for the synthetic turf field that you propose. With the track out of the way, you can do this right. You can build the curb first, bring the asphalt to it, bring the field base and carpet to it, and tie it all together the way it's intended. So, that's kind of our initial thinking about your project. Any questions before I go on? Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask about the siting? Because I'm on the Senior School Building Committee, and so we're trying to think ahead also to upgrading the high school there. And one of the issues is the road on the left-hand side of the road here.
Yes.
And the narrowness of it, and the traffic constriction that happens coming in and out. So something we were thinking about is widening that road. So is it possible to move the whole field over to the right a little bit?
I don't think so, but I don't think so because baseball, the foul line for baseball goes right here, and that's the limiting factor, how far we can move it that way. But if you have a 400-meter track at the measure line in the inside lane, and if you open up the width, correspondingly, in order to maintain it at 400 meters, the two radius points have to move toward each other. So you're going to pick up, it's going to be a little bit wider, a little bit squattier track. Inherent in that, you're going to pick up some space over here for a widening in for a sidewalk, if that's your question.
For a sidewalk?
Sidewalk.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, would it be possible to get another lane of traffic?
I don't know that. Again, this is a cartoon. It's not a really well surveyed or laid out facility. But as we get into design development, get a survey done, get the geotechnical work done, and lay out an actual engineered document, that will be very apparent to us.
Would it all be possible, maybe too much, to tilt the baseball field so that the third baseline is at a different angle?
No, it's not possible.
It's not possible because of cost to reduce right to back.
Yeah, no, in fact, we spent a lot of money on the field to reconstruct the whole thing, so I don't think it's possible to, you have to move the entire, you have to dig up the entire infield, I think, and move it, correct?
Well, you have the leaching field now.
Yeah, that's true, too, we have that septic system right over there,
There's
too.
just not room for that.
Yeah.
Even though
It's just not possible. And the leach field, could you indicate on the graph, on the diagram there, where this is the leach field for the housing district?
Yeah, the house, yeah, that's
Stuff on that's up further.
by the baseball field.
Yeah.
It's over there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Yes?
I think also, as far as widening the roadway there, it depends on the right-of-way, where the other property line is on the other side. There might be the ability to add additional pavement there to get to another lane.
You mean where the private property is, Mike? Private property on the other
Yes,
side?
on the other side. This doesn't really show where the property lines
Right.
are, but you might have 10 to 12 feet to work with there where you could expand the pavement.
Yeah,
It's not a lot, but there might be enough.
exactly.
There are some pretty definitive wetlands along this edge here too, though, that are going to really limit what we can do to improve that access drive. But again, once we get the flag, once we get the survey, we'll know it when we see it. Other questions? Slide, please. I did want to show you Fitzpatrick Stadium in Portland, and I wanted to show it to you because I think it's very, very typical of what we're proposing for your facility. Like our initial thinking of your facility, we've got 8 lanes in the straightaway and 6 lanes in the chute. We've got high jump and discus throwing to the natural synthetic turf field in one of the D areas. We've got shot put outside of the oval. We've got bleachers that are tangent to the inside lane line. You have to have a 1 meter offset from the outside lane to any vertical obstruction, which we've respected. You've got long jump, triple jump, in this case, heading in both directions in 1D area. They put pole vault outside the oval. What we're showing, again, in our very preliminary graphic, is high jump, discus, long jump, triple jump, pole vault, and shot put outside the oval, 8 and 6. Paved and surface D areas. and a multiply striped synthetic turf infield. Here again, you've got football, you've got soccer, you've got field hockey, all tufted permanently in the carpet as we would propose to do for your multi-purpose field as well. I wanted to show you Portland because I think it's very analogous in terms of the scope of the project.
Is that the field that's right next to the CDOG?
CDOG Field is right there.
That's a great,
Yep.
that's a great facility.
Yep. That's Fitzpatrick Stadium, and my dad was the starting quarterback for Coach Fitzpatrick's last game in that stadium. I was very, very, very proud to do that. My dad rededicated the field at 81 years old. So anyway, one of my favorite projects. But I do think it's very comparable to what it is we would propose to do in North Reading. Questions on that? Slide, please. There's been a lot of discussion about public toilets. And I think what Tom will tell you in a minute is that we're not proposing to do public toilets as the initiating phase of this project. But I'll let him run through that. But I did want to say that we do public restrooms at the majority of the stadiums for which we consult. There is a great deal of emphasis being placed on public restrooms for public stadiums like this. As you probably have heard, the building code can be prohibitive with regard to the number of fixtures that are incorporated into these facilities. The building code does not distinguish North Reading's high school football stadium that's used 6 or 7 times a year from Foxborough Stadium in terms of the number of fixtures per seat, ratios. And as a result, assuming we put in 1,000 seats, right now you have about 1,200, assuming we put 1,000 seats back, and assuming that you went forward with a compliant facility without seeking a waiver, it would pull you to something on the order of 14 toilets and 4 sinks in the women's facility, and 7 toilets and 3 urinals and 3 sinks in the men's facility. Those types of numbers for most public high schools are prohibitive, particularly today when you have no facilities on site and it isn't really a problem. That's the bad news. The good news is, and I won't go too far down this road because it is very preliminary, we've been very, very successful in seeking waivers, both in terms of alleviating the requirement for public restrooms, given the supplemental fixtures that are at the high school, and failing that, at least getting some consideration in terms of the number of fixtures that are mandated for your new facility. Off the top of my head, gut feel, I'd say 50% of the fixtures probably would be required at your facility. Basically 7 and 4.
Required outside or required in the building?
I think they would be required outside. That's my gut feel. But I think any other conjecture would be way too preliminary.
Just one question.
Yes, sir.
So if the school committee votes to transfer control of the land to Hillview Parks and Rec, or whatever that warrant item reads, does that change the requirements because it's not a school facility?
No.
Or the requirements are still?
No. It is a pace of public assembly constituting a stadium, and therefore there is a per-seat ratio that would need to be met.
And you know if there's been any thought given to changing a law that
There is absolutely a groundswell of support for legislation that would change the ratios, that would recognize the difference between a high school stadium and a college or a professional stadium. I think it's probably 12 to 18 months out, and in the interim, recognizing the disparity in the code, the State Plumbing Board has been very forthcoming with waivers. And that's how they're answering the question right now.
Because as I say, if you had 14 toilet facilities in the women's room, at some of our football games, it'd be one facility for each woman at the game.
Well, that's the problem. Why do they have twice as many toilets? I don't understand.
The code clearly says that. So I think there will be some relief. To what extent? I did want to show you a facility that we've done on a public facility. It is concessions on both sides of the corner with pull-down windows, ADA accessible height shelves, a trainer room, an overhead door to a storage area for goals and for balls and whatever. And on the other side, there's men's room and women's room. Slide, please. Looking at it in plan view, I think this might be about what you could be pulled into. There's 7 women's fixtures, 4 and 3 for the men on the other side. Again, storage, trainer room, and concessions. Slide, please. This is a scaled-down version of the same building that we did on a municipal facility up in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. Again, same architecture, same model. People seem to like it. Slide, please. Similarly, I wanted to give you thoughts on the bleachers. This is a 1,000 bleacher set. It is a rearward exiting set of bleachers like I think you need. It is a pre-engineered press box with all the bells and whistles in it. It has ADA accessible ramps at both ends. It is color-coded for the school colors. It has a 36-inch raised deck in front that is 6 feet wide for ADA accessibility passage. And it has the various parking bays associated with it. It's code compliant for accessibility, life safety code, structural code. And again, I think that's probably what you're looking at. Something like that. This particular set, if you want to see it, is at Neshoba Regional up in Bolton. Slide, please. Finally, why are you doing this? If you do it, you're doing it because a infill synthetic turf field represents 3 field equivalents of what you have today in terms of its ability to sustain use without detriment to the quality of the turf. And it's really a function of not how much you can beat the turf, it's a question of how quickly you can cycle users on and off the field. It becomes your practice venue, it becomes your game venue, it becomes your youth sport venue on weekends. You no longer care how much you use it. It's very expensive. It's an $850,000 field, give or take. On the other hand, on a per-use basis, it's not even comparable. And in terms of the maintenance savings over time, and we can talk about that if you'd like, do you make it all back? I don't think so. The turf guys would tell you that you do. I don't think you ever catch up in terms of life cycle costing. But it is clearly advantageous in terms of maintenance. And again, we can talk about more if you have questions.
Could you just briefly talk about the maintenance?
Sure, be happy to. You may not believe what I'm about to say, but we can show you the numbers. You're currently paying somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 to maintain your natural turf field, and you get to use it a couple dozen times a season. You're cutting it every week, you're striping it every week, you're watering it every week to the tune of about 200,000 gallons per year. You're fertilizing it a couple times a year, you're doing pH adjustment. I hope you're aerating it and top dressing it a couple times a year. When you factor all that in, and materials cost, and equipment depreciation, and labor, that's somewhere around $35,000 a year. And we've documented that in detail in Sudbury and in Norwood. We've actually studied the numbers. The synthetic infill field comes with a groomer. It's towed by a pickup truck or a tractor, something you already have. It takes 5 minutes to teach somebody to do it, and you drag this broom over the field 3 or 4 times a year. If you do it more than that, you're over grooming it. To the tune of about maybe $1,000 a year. Over the 12 to 15 year life of the carpet, we can talk about that too if you want, I don't think that makes up the difference in the cost of the field. On the other hand, it's clearly very advantageous.
Do you ever have to replace or add to the rubber and sand?
In the and we've done, just to put it in context, we've done about 75 of these. At no time have we ever had to come back and do a replenishment of the infill, has the contractor had to come back, except at the 6-month anniversary. At the 6-month anniversary, we write into our specifications that the contractor will come back, do a warranty inspection of the fields, check all the seams, check all the markings, check the level of the infill, check the Gmax, which is the shock attenuation measure of the field, and take any corrective action that's necessary thereafter. The field, you're not going to like it for the first 60 days. For the first 60 days, it's going to be too soft. You're going to have crumbs on your socks and in your shoes, and you're not going to be real happy. And I tell owners that, just hang in there. After it gets rained on, after it gets played on, it will settle down. The Gmax will actually go up and then plateau off. It will go in initially at a value of about 100. That's very soft. Your athlete's legs will be a little bit tired after practice. But it will trend out at about 130, 135, if any of you know Gmax. 200, it's an ASTM standard for shock attenuation for athletic fields. 200 is deemed to be too hard by the federal standard. We don't want to get anywhere near that. A turf broken down field at the